For the first 10 years after Richard died, the silence was the loudest thing in my life. It was a heavy physical presence, the kind that settled in your bones and made the floorboards creak with a lonely weight. I lived in a small third-floor walk-up apartment that always smelled faintly of my downstairs neighbors cooking and dust. The quiet was broken only by the hum of the old refrigerator, the sigh of the radiators in winter, and the television I kept on for the illusion of company. My life had shrunk down to the size of those 4 rooms. My children, Mark and Clara, had been there for the funeral, of course. They had stood on either side of me, their hands on my elbows, a perfect portrait of grieving offspring. But their support was like a stage prop, sturdy for the performance but packed away the moment the curtain fell. In the months that followed, their visits grew shorter, their calls less frequent. They had their own lives, they said. Mark had his burgeoning career in finance and a wife, Jessica, who always looked at my modest apartment as if it were a contagious illness. Clara was a freelance graphic designer, always chasing deadlines, always stressed about money, always needing just a little help to get through the month. I gave them that help. Richard's life insurance had seemed like a fortune at first, a sum that promised security, but it was bled away. $1,000 here for Mark's down payment, $500 there for Clara's car repairs, a few hundred for Jessica's birthday gift to a friend she needed to impress. I never kept track. A mother doesn't keep a ledger on her own children. You give what you have, and then you give what you don't. When the account was finally empty, and I had to tell them there was nothing left, the silence I had grown used to in my apartment seemed to expand, stretching over the phone lines to encompass them as well. They didn't abandon me all at once. It was a slow, quiet erosion, a forgotten birthday, a Christmas spent with their in-laws without so much as an invitation for me to join, phone calls that went to voicemail and were never returned. I told myself it was because they were busy. I told myself I was being a burden. I stopped asking for anything, even their time. I took a part-time job shelving books at the local library, the 4-hour shifts a welcome respite from the oppressive quiet of my home. The pay was barely enough to cover rent and utilities, but the company of books was a comfort. They demanded nothing and gave everything. My only real connection to the family I had built was my granddaughter, Lily. She was Mark and Jessica's daughter, a bright, thoughtful girl who had somehow escaped her parents' transactional view of the world. Once a week, every Sunday afternoon, she would call me. She didn't want anything. She just wanted to talk. She'd tell me about school, about the book she was reading, about a funny-looking bird she saw in the park. She saw me. In a world where I had become invisible, her weekly calls were a lifeline, a confirmation that I still existed. The day it happened was a Tuesday. It was gray and damp, the kind of day that seeps into your joints. I had finished my shift at the library and was walking home, my thin coat pulled tight against the wind. On a whim, a strange impulse I couldn't explain, I stopped at the corner store. I never bought lottery tickets. Richard used to say it was a tax on people who were bad at math. But that day, I saw the display of scratch-off tickets behind the counter, their bright, garish colors a stark contrast to the gray world outside. I bought one, a $2 ticket called Millionaire's Fortune. Back in my apartment, I made a cup of tea, the ritual a small comfort against the encroaching evening. I sat at my small kitchen table and pulled the ticket from my pocket. I used a penny from the change the cashier had given me to scratch away the silver film. I wasn't expecting anything. It was just a way to pass a few minutes, a tiny $2 deviation from the unvarying routine of my life. I scratched off the first number. It was a 17. Then I scratched off the winning numbers at the top. One of them was 17. The prize listed below it was $2. A small, tight smile touched my lips. I'd won my money back. I almost stopped there. I almost tossed the ticket in the bin, content with the small, meaningless victory. But something made me keep scratching. I revealed the next number. A 32. It matched. The prize was $10. Then a 4. Another match. $50. My heart began to beat a little faster, a nervous flutter in my chest. This was foolish. It was a trick of the game, designed to make you feel like you were winning before the inevitable loss. I scratched the last 2 spots in the row, a 19 and a 26. Both matched. I looked at the prizes beneath them, my breath held tight in my throat. One read $1,000. The other read $2 million. I stared at the ticket. The numbers and letters seemed to blur, to swim before my eyes. $2 million. It was an impossible number, a figure from a different world, a different life. I checked it again, and again. I read the fine print on the back, my hands trembling so much I could barely hold it steady. It was real. I had won. I had won $2 million. My first feeling was not joy. It was not excitement or relief. It was a cold, deep, and profound wave of dread. I felt it in the pit of my stomach, a heavy stone sinking into water. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the wet street below. The money wasn't a blessing, it was a problem. It was a siren's call that I knew with absolute certainty would summon them, Mark and Clara. They would hear it no matter how quiet I was, and they would come for their share. I didn't cash the ticket that day. I slipped it inside the pages of an old copy of Middlemarch that sat on my nightstand, a book so dense I knew no one would ever disturb it. For a week, I went about my life as if nothing had changed. I went to the library. I ate my simple meals. I waited for Lily's Sunday call. But everything had changed. The silence in the apartment was different now. It was no longer just empty. It was watchful. It was the silence of a secret. The dread didn't lessen. It grew. I would wake up in the middle of the night, my heart pounding. The image of the ticket burned into my mind. The money felt like a target painted on my back. I knew what I should do. I should go to the lottery office, claim my prize, and disappear, change my name, move to a different state, and live out my days in peace. But the thought of leaving Lily, of severing that one, true connection, was unbearable. She was the only anchor I had left. After 2 weeks of living with the secret, I knew I couldn't keep going like this. My old car, a 20-year-old sedan that coughed and sputtered every morning, had finally given up. The mechanic had shaken his head and told me it would cost more to fix it than the car was worth. Getting to the library was now a complicated affair of 2 bus transfers. I needed a car. Not a new one, not a fancy one, just something reliable. It was a necessity. But it was also the first crack in the dam. I finally took the ticket to the lottery headquarters in the state capitol. The process was surprisingly mundane. Forms to fill out, identification to show. I met with a financial advisor they provided, a kind woman who explained the payout options. I chose the lump sum. After taxes, it came to just over $1,300,000. The number was still staggering. I had it deposited into a new account at a new bank, one where I had no history. Then I went to a used car dealership. I bought a 3-year-old Honda Civic. It was silver, clean, and unremarkable in every way. It was the most sensible car on the lot. It cost $14,000. I paid for it with a cashier's check from the new bank account. Driving it home, I felt a small, unfamiliar flicker of pleasure. The engine was quiet, the steering was smooth. It was the first significant thing I had bought for myself in more than a decade. It was a purchase born of need, but it felt like an indulgence. The trouble started 2 days later. My next-door neighbor, a sweet but irrepressibly chatty woman named Brenda, saw me polishing the car in the apartment parking lot. She came over, full of questions and congratulations. "Oh, Eleanor, a new car. It's beautiful. Good for you," she gushed. Before I could stop her, she had taken a picture of me standing beside it, a proud, awkward smile on my face. That evening, she posted it on her social media page. "So happy for my dear neighbor Eleanor and her brand new wheels. You deserve it," she wrote. I didn't have a social media account, so I didn't know. But Jessica, Mark's wife, was one of Brenda's online friends. The call came the next night. It was Mark. I hadn't spoken to him in 4 months. His voice was smooth, casual, but with an undercurrent I recognized immediately. It was the same tone he used when he was about to ask for something. "Mom, how are you doing?" he asked. The false warmth in his voice made my skin crawl. "I'm well, Mark. How are you?" I answered, my own voice carefully neutral. Good, busy. Listen, Jessica saw a picture Brenda posted, of you with a new car. A pretty nice one, it looked like." There was a pause. I said nothing. I just waited. "I was just surprised, that's all," he continued. "Where did you get the money for something like that? The last we spoke, you were having trouble making ends meet." The accusation was clear, wrapped in a thin veneer of concern. "You were poor, and now you are not. You have been hiding something from us." "My old car died," I said simply. "I needed a new one." "Right, I get that. But how did you pay for it? Did you take out a loan? At your age, that's not a good idea, Mom. The interest rates would be terrible. You should have talked to me first. I could have helped you figure something out." The condescension was suffocating. He wasn't offering help. He was asserting control. He was telling me that my finances were his business. "I handled it," I said, my voice colder than I intended. "You handled it," he repeated slowly, as if the words were a foreign language. "What does that mean? Did Richard have another policy you didn't tell us about? Some secret savings account?" The questions were coming faster now, the pretense of casual conversation falling away. "It's my business, Mark," I said. The words felt strange in my mouth. I'd never spoken to him like that before. I had always been accommodating, apologetic, eager to please. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing. "Fine," he finally said, his voice clipped and angry. "Be that way. But don't come crying to me when you're in debt and can't pay your rent." He hung up without saying goodbye. I put the phone down, my hand shaking slightly. It had begun. The first shot had been fired. I didn't feel fear, not this time. I felt a cold, sharp anger. He hadn't called to see how I was. He hadn't called to ask if I needed anything. He had called to investigate an unauthorized purchase. He had called to stake his claim on money he didn't even know existed. 2 days later, Clara called. Her approach was different. She was all sweetness and manufactured sympathy. "Mommy?" I was so worried. "Mark told me he called you and you two had a fight. He said you bought a new car and wouldn't tell him how. Are you okay? Is someone taking advantage of you?" "I'm fine, Clara. No one is taking advantage of me," I said, my voice weary. I could see the strategy now. Mark played the angry inquisitor. Clara played the concerned daughter. They were working together, a pincer movement designed to wear me down. "But where did the money come from?" she wheedled. "We're just worried about you. You've been so fragile since Dad died. It would be easy for some con artist to trick you. Did you get a reverse mortgage? Oh, Mom, you shouldn't have done that without talking to us. Those things are a scam." They had already constructed a narrative. I was old, fragile, and incompetent. Any money I had must be ill-gotten or the result of a foolish decision. It couldn't possibly be mine. It couldn't be that I was simply a person with her own life, her own resources. They had long since relegated me to the role of a dependent, a problem to be managed. My sudden small show of independence was a violation of that role. "I didn't get a reverse mortgage," I said. "I'm going to hang up now, Clara. I have things to do." "Wait," she said, a note of panic in her voice. "Don't shut us out, Mom. We love you. We just want to help." "You have a strange way of showing it," I said, and I ended the call. The next move was an escalation. On Saturday afternoon, they showed up at my apartment, both of them. I heard the knock on the door and looked through the peephole. My heart sank. Mark stood there, his face a mask of grim determination. Clara was beside him, wringing her hands, her expression one of painful concern. I knew this was a performance. I opened the door. They pushed past me into the small living room, their presence overwhelming the tiny space. Jessica was with them, standing just behind Mark, her arms crossed, her eyes sweeping over my worn furniture with undisguised contempt. "Mom, we need to talk," Mark said, turning to face me. He didn't sit down. He stood in the middle of the room like a prosecutor addressing a courtroom. "You've been hiding money from us. For how long? All these years. You let us think you were barely scraping by. You let us feel guilty. For what? To punish us?" I stared at him, speechless. The audacity of it was breathtaking. He was rewriting history in real time. He was taking their neglect and turning it into my deception. "Feel guilty?" I finally managed to say, my voice a hoarse whisper. "You never acted guilty, Mark. You just disappeared." "Because you pushed us away!" Clara cried, her voice rising. "You were so wrapped up in your grief, there was no room for anyone else. We had to get on with our lives. We have families, responsibilities. We couldn't just sit here and hold your hand forever." And there it was. The truth, ugly and unvarnished. My grief had been an inconvenience. My presence had been a burden. Their abandonment hadn't been a thoughtless drifting apart. It had been a conscious decision, a strategy for their own comfort. "We decided," she continued, her voice trembling with self-pity, "that it was best for everyone if we gave you some space. We thought you would reach out when you were ready, but you never did. You just cut us off." The phrase hung in the air. "We decided." It wasn't just Clara's thoughtless outburst. It was a confession. I looked from her face to Mark's. He didn't deny it. He just stood there, his jaw tight. Jessica smirked, a tiny triumphant flicker of a smile. They had discussed it. They had held a meeting, made a plan, and executed it. They had voted me off the island of their lives. The pain was a physical thing. It was a sharp, cold blade sliding between my ribs. For 10 years, I had blamed myself. I had told myself I wasn't trying hard enough, that I was too needy, that I was the reason my family had fallen apart. Now I knew the truth. I hadn't been a failed matriarch. I had been a line item in their budget of emotional energy, and I had been cut. I sank down onto the arm of my worn sofa, the strength gone from my legs. The room felt suddenly airless, the walls closing in. I looked at their faces, Mark's angry entitlement, Clara's tearful justification, Jessica's cold disdain. These were not my children. These were strangers. Strangers who had worn the faces of my children for years. "So you're not going to tell us," Mark said, his voice flat. It wasn't a question. "Fine, we'll find out. There are ways. Bank records aren't as private as you think, Mom, especially when your children are concerned about your welfare." It was a threat. "You need to leave," I said. My voice was quiet, but it had a strange, new weight to it. It was the sound of something breaking inside me, or perhaps something hardening. "We're not leaving until we get some answers," Mark retorted. "Yes, you are," I said, rising to my feet. I walked to the door and opened it. I stood there, holding it open, and waited. The silence stretched. The air was thick with their anger and my newfound resolve. Clara started to cry again. "Mom, please, don't do this." "Get out of my home," I said. Mark stared at me for a long moment. His eyes narrowed. He was seeing something new in my face, something he didn't recognize and didn't know how to fight. He finally gave a sharp nod to Jessica and Clara. He walked past me without a word, his shoulder brushing mine. Clara followed, sobbing. Jessica was the last to leave. She paused in the doorway and looked at me. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice low and venomous. Then she was gone. I closed the door and slid the deadbolt into place. The sound was loud and final in the quiet apartment. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door and closed my eyes. I didn't cry. The tears were gone. The pain was still there, a deep, aching hollow in my chest, but it was different now. It was no longer the soft, pliable ache of grief. It was the hard, sharp-edged certainty of betrayal. I stood there for a long time. The phrase, "we decided," echoed in my mind. It was the key that unlocked a decade of self-blame and confusion. I thought back to all the lonely holidays, the unanswered phone calls, the polite excuses. It had all been a lie, a carefully managed campaign to phase me out of their lives. And now, at the first cent of money, they were back, trying to claw their way back in, not with love or remorse, but with entitlement and threats. That was the moment everything shifted. The grief that had been my constant companion for 10 years finally burned itself out. In its place was a cold, clear, and quiet fury. It wasn't a hot, screaming rage. It was a glacial calm. The part of me that had been waiting for them to love me, to see me, to want me, finally died, and in its place something new was born, a woman I hadn't met before, a woman who was done being a victim, a woman who was done crying. She was a strategist, and she was going to war. The next Monday, I didn't go to the library. I went to a different kind of library, the internet. I spent hours researching. I looked up financial advisors, estate lawyers, and private investigators. I read articles about asset protection, trusts, and legal firewalls. I was methodical. I made a list of names and phone numbers. I was no longer a fragile old woman. I was a researcher gathering intelligence. My first call was to a man named Arthur Davies. He was a financial advisor who specialized in wealth management for people who had come into sudden money. His website was professional, discreet, and full of testimonials from lottery winners and inheritance recipients. When I called, his assistant put me through to him immediately. His voice was calm and measured. "Good morning, Mrs. Vance. How can I help you?" I took a deep breath. "My name is Eleanor Vance. I recently won $2 million in the state lottery, and I have a problem." I told him everything. I told him about Richard, about the life insurance, about the 10 years of silence from my children, and about their sudden, aggressive reappearance. I didn't get emotional. I laid out the facts as if I were reporting on a case study. He listened patiently, without interruption. When I was finished, there was a brief pause. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice even. "First, congratulations on your win. Second, your problem is not unique. In fact, it's tragically common. The good news is that it is entirely solvable." For the first time in days, I felt a sliver of hope. "What do I do?" I asked. "The first thing we do is make the money invisible," he said. "We will create an irrevocable trust. This will legally separate the assets from you as an individual. You will be the beneficiary, but the trust itself will be the owner. We will name a corporate trustee, which will insulate it from any personal pressure. This makes it exceptionally difficult for anyone to make a legal claim against it." He went on to explain the mechanics, the legal structures, the firewalls we could build. He spoke of it all with a cool, professional detachment that I found incredibly reassuring. He wasn't selling me a dream. He was providing me with tools. My next call was to a lawyer he recommended, a woman named Sarah Albright. She was a partner at a firm that specialized in estate law and litigation. When I met her in her office 2 days later, I was struck by her presence. She was in her 50s, with sharp eyes and an air of quiet, unshakable competence. I told her the story again. This time I brought a small folder with me. In it, I had printed out the social media post from Brenda. I had written down the dates and times of the calls from Mark and Clara with notes on what was said. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Ms. Albright listened, her expression unreadable. She looked at my notes. When I finished, she looked me directly in the eye. "Eleanor," she said, forgoing the formal Mrs. Vance, "they abandoned you when you were a liability. Now they've returned because they see you as an asset. This is not about family. This is a business transaction, and they see you as the inventory. Our job is to liquidate that inventory and move it to a secure location." The cold, commercial language should have been jarring. Instead, it was validating. She saw the situation for what it was. She wasn't judging me for wanting to protect myself. She wasn't telling me to reconcile or think of my children. She was affirming my reality. Over the next few weeks, we worked. Arthur Davies and Sarah Albright became my generals. We set up the irrevocable trust. We called it the Lily Pad Trust, a small private tribute to my granddaughter. I was the lifetime beneficiary, meaning I would receive regular income from the trust to live on. But the principal, the bulk of the $2 million, was protected. The trust documents were a work of art, a fortress of legal language. We included a specific clause, known as a no contest or in terrorem clause. It stipulated that if any party, named or unnamed, were to legally challenge the trust's validity, they would be automatically and permanently disinherited from any potential benefit, present or future. Then, Ms. Albright had me draft a new will. My old will, written years ago when Richard was alive, had split everything evenly between Mark and Clara. The new one was simple. It left my personal effects, my books, my photographs, the worn furniture in my apartment, to be divided between them as they saw fit. The entire residue of my estate, including all assets held in any trust of which I was a beneficiary, was to go to one person, my granddaughter, Lily Vance. We made sure to include a section that explicitly stated my reasoning. I wrote it myself, with Ms. Albright's guidance to make it legally sound. I wrote, "I make this disposition with a clear mind and a full heart. My son, Mark Vance, and my daughter, Clara Jensen, having made a conscious and deliberate decision to remove themselves from my life for a period of more than 10 years, are intentionally omitted from this will, not from a lack of affection, but as a direct consequence of their actions and choices. They abandon me in my poverty. I shall not reward them in my wealth." As we worked, the threats from Mark continued. He left voicemails. "Mom, I know you're getting this. I've spoken to a lawyer. We have rights as your children. We can have you declared incompetent. We can have a guardian appointed to manage your affairs. Don't force our hand." Clara's messages were a mix of tears and accusations. "How could you do this to us? After everything we've been through, Jessica is telling everyone you've lost your mind. Mark is so angry he won't even talk to me. You're tearing this family apart." I saved every message. I played them for Ms. Albright. She listened, her face impassive, and made notes. "This is good," she said calmly. "This is evidence of intent. They aren't concerned for your welfare. They are attempting to extort you. Keep letting them talk." The final piece of the plan was the confrontation. Mrs. Albright advised against it. "There's no legal need," she said. "The documents are ironclad. You can simply block their numbers and disappear into your new life." "No," I told her. "This isn't just about the law, and it isn't about the money anymore. It's about the truth. They need to hear it, and I need to be the one to say it." She studied my face for a moment. "All right," she said, "but we do it on your terms. A neutral location, a clear exit strategy, and no negotiation." I chose a small private dining room at the Hawthorne, a quiet, old-fashioned hotel restaurant downtown. It was a place Richard and I used to go for our anniversary. The memory no longer hurt. It felt distant, like a story about someone else. I sent a simple text message to both Mark and Clara from my new phone. "I am prepared to discuss my financial situation with you. Meet me at the Hawthorne, private room B, Tuesday at 7 p.m. Come alone." I spent the day of the meeting in quiet preparation. I went to the bank and withdrew $10,000 in cash. I had the teller put it in a simple manila envelope. I then went to a small gift shop and bought a beautiful leather-bound journal and a silver pen. I drove to Lily's school and waited for her to get out. Mark and Jessica had no idea I was there. When Lily came out, her face lit up when she saw me. I hadn't seen her in person in weeks, wanting to shield her from the conflict. "Grandma," she cried, running over to my car. "Hello, my love," I said, my heart aching with a fierce, protective love. We talked for a few minutes. I gave her the journal and pen. "I want you to write down your stories," I told her, "the important ones." I gave her a hug that felt both like a hello and a goodbye. I knew things were about to change, and I wanted her to have this small, pure moment before the storm broke. That evening, I dressed carefully. I wore a simple black dress and the single strand of pearls Richard had given me for our 25th anniversary. I felt calm. The nervous flutter was gone. I was an actress walking onto a stage for the final scene of a play she knew by heart. I arrived early and sat at the table, the manila envelope in my purse in front of me. At 7 o'clock sharp, the door opened. Mark, Clara, and Jessica walked in. So much for come alone. Mark's face was a mixture of suspicion and greed. Clara looked nervous. Jessica looked smug, as if she had already won. They sat down opposite me. No one said a word. A waiter came in and asked if we wanted drinks. "Just water," I said. They nodded in agreement. I let the silence sit for a moment. I watched them. I saw the impatience in Mark's eyes, the way he kept glancing at the envelope on the table. "Thank you for coming," I began, my voice even and clear. "I said I was prepared to discuss my financial situation, and I am. But first, I want to establish some facts." I looked at Clara. "A few weeks ago, in my apartment, you said that you and Mark decided it was for the best to give me space after your father died. Is that correct?" Clara flushed. She looked at Mark for help, but he was staring at me, his expression hardening. I was upset," she stammered. "I didn't mean it like that." "Did you or did you not have a conversation in which you and your brother made a conscious decision to reduce your contact with me?" I pressed, my voice unyielding. She looked down at her hands. "Yes," she whispered. I turned to Mark. "And you agreed with this decision?" "It was more complicated than that," he snapped. "You were impossible to be around. Every conversation was about Dad, about how sad you were. We had lives to lead." "I see," I said. "My grief was an imposition on your lives. So you chose to step away. You stopped calling. You stopped visiting. You left me alone for 10 years, except when you needed money from the life insurance. Is that a fair summary?" "No," Clara said, her voice rising. "We loved you." "Love," I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Is that what you call it? A few weeks ago, you didn't even know if I had enough money for groceries. You didn't care. But the moment you saw a picture of a new car, you were suddenly consumed with concern for my welfare. That isn't love. That's opportunism." Jessica scoffed. "Oh, get off your high horse. You had money and you didn't tell us. You lied to us." "I never lied," I said, turning my gaze on her. "You never asked. For 10 years, you never once asked if I was okay. You just assumed I was a sad, poor old woman, and you were content with that assumption because it required nothing of you. My poverty was your permission to forget me." I paused and took a sip of water. My hands were perfectly steady. "Now, for the financial discussion you're so eager to have, you're correct. I did come into some money. I won the lottery." The effect of those 3 words was instantaneous and profound. Jessica's jaw dropped. Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Mark's eyes widened, the greed in them now naked and blazing. "How much?" he breathed, leaning forward. $2 million, I said quietly. A choked sound came from Clara's throat. Mark stared at me, his mind clearly racing, calculating, planning. "So this is it," he said, gesturing at the envelope. "You're finally going to do the right thing, apologize and make it right with your family." I almost laughed. The sheer, unmitigated arrogance of the man was a marvel. He truly believed he was the injured party. He believed he was owed an apology. "This," I said, sliding the manila envelope across the table toward him, "is for you." He snatched it eagerly, his fingers tearing at the clasp. He pulled out the stacks of cash. He stared at it, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What is this? 10,000? This is an insult." "No," I said. "It is a transaction. Your father's life insurance paid out $400,000. Over the first 2 years after his death, before you decided to abandon me, I gave you and Clara, combined, approximately $190,000. For your house, Mark. For your business, Clara. For your cars, your debts, your vacations. I have no record of it, because I never thought I'd need one. But my memory is quite clear. I continued, my voice low and steady. This $10,000 brings the total to $200,000. That is exactly half of your father's legacy. The other half I lived on for 10 years. You have now received every single penny that you could possibly claim as your inheritance from him. We are square. Mark stared at the cash, then at me, his face turning a dark, mottled red. You can't be serious. You won $2 million. That's family money. No, I said firmly. It is not. It is my money. And you are not my family. Not anymore. A family does not decide to abandon its mother because her grief is inconvenient. A family does not materialize only when there is money to be had. What we are, Mark, is a failed business arrangement, and I am here tonight to dissolve the partnership. I stood up. The rest of the money, the lottery winnings, has been placed in an irrevocable trust. I am the lifetime beneficiary. Upon my death, the remainder of the trust will pass to the only member of this family who has ever shown me genuine, unconditional love. It will all go to Lily. The name hit them like a physical blow. Jessica let out a small, strangled cry of outrage. You're giving it to her. To a child? You're cutting out your own son? I am not cutting out my son. I corrected her. I am rewarding my granddaughter. The will is ironclad, as is the trust. There are clauses that will automatically disinherit anyone who challenges it. My lawyer, Ms. Albright, is exceptionally good at her job. You will not see another penny. Mark shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You bitch, he hissed, his voice trembling with rage. You selfish old bitch. You'd rather give it all to a kid than help your own children? Yes, I said, meeting his furious gaze without flinching. Because she loves me. And you love what you think I can give you. There is a difference. It has taken me 10 years and $2 million to finally understand that. I picked up my purse. The $10,000 on the table is a gift, a final severance. You can take it, or you can leave it. But what you cannot do is ever contact me again. Not by phone, not by email, not in person. If you do, I will pursue a restraining order for harassment. We are finished. I turned and walked to the door. I didn't look back. I could feel their stunned, hateful silence behind me. I walked out of the restaurant into the cool night air, and I did not run. I walked calmly to my reliable, sensible car. I got in, started the engine, and drove away. I did not cry. I felt nothing but a vast, quiet, and profound emptiness. The emptiness of a space that has finally been cleared of rubble. The emptiness of a wound that has been cauterized. The next few days were a storm. My phone, the old one I had kept for this purpose, was bombarded with calls and texts. They came from Mark, from Clara, from Jessica, even from Jessica's mother. They were a torrent of rage, disbelief, pleading, and threats. You have destroyed this family. One text from Clara read, My lawyer will see you in court, read one from Mark. You are a sick, twisted woman. Lily will be taught what you are, read one from Jessica. I read each one, my face impassive. Then I took the phone, walked out to the dumpster behind my apartment building and dropped it in. I went back inside, made myself a cup of tea, and opened a book. The silence that filled my apartment was no longer heavy or watchful. It was light. It was clean. It was peace. I heard about the fallout through Brenda, who heard it through the convoluted grapevine of social media. Mark and Jessica were telling everyone that I had dementia, that I had been manipulated by a predatory lawyer into giving away the family fortune. Some people believed them. Some didn't. It didn't matter. Their opinions were ghosts in a world I no longer inhabited. Mark did try to sue. He hired a lawyer and filed a petition to have me declared incompetent and to contest the validity of the trust. it was summarily dismissed. Mrs. Albright sent him a crisp, formal letter reminding him of the no contest clause and informing him that his legal action had now officially voided any claim he might have had, even to my personal effects. He had, in his greed, disinherited himself from his father's photographs and his mother's worn armchair. The irony was not lost on me. The $10,000 was taken from the table. I knew it would be. Their principals had a price, and it was apparently less than $10,000. I never heard how they split it. A month later, I moved. With the help of Arthur Davies, I bought a small 2-bedroom cottage in a quiet town about 100 miles away. It had a garden. It was the first time I had a garden since Richard and I had sold our family home. The house was filled with light. I spent weeks painting the walls, buying comfortable furniture, and filling the shelves with books from my old apartment and new ones from the local bookshop. My new life took shape slowly, quietly. I started planting in the garden. Tomatoes, lavender, roses. I found a new routine. I woke with the sun. I drank my coffee on the small porch, listening to the birds. I read. I baked. I took long walks. The heavy weight I had carried in my chest for so many years was gone. I felt lighter. I felt like myself. My relationship with Lily changed. Mark and Jessica, in their bitterness, tried to use her as a weapon. They told her I was a bad person, that I had stolen her father's money. They forbade her from contacting me. For a few weeks, the Sunday calls stopped. My heart ached, but I did not interfere. I had to trust her. I had to trust the bond we had built. One Sunday afternoon, my new phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered it cautiously. "Grandma," a small voice said. It was Lily. She was calling from a friend's phone. "Lily, my love," I said, sinking into a chair. "I've missed you so much." "I miss you too," she said, her voice thick with tears. "Mom and Dad are so mad. They said horrible things about you, but I don't believe them. You wouldn't do that." "It's complicated, sweetheart," I said gently. "But what you need to know is that I love you very much, and nothing will ever change that." From then on, our communication became our own little secret. She would call when she could. I would write her long letters, telling her about my garden, about the books I was reading, about the memories of her grandfather she had never met. I never spoke ill of her parents. I just told her my stories. I was planting a different kind of garden, a garden of truth in her heart. I knew that one day when she was old enough, she would understand everything. It has been a year now since that night at the Hawthorne. The silence in my cottage is a comfortable companion. It is the silence of peace, not of loneliness. My garden is thriving. This morning I picked the first ripe tomato, its skin warm from the sun. It was small and perfectly red. I do not feel triumphant. I do not feel vengeful. The satisfaction I feel is quiet and somber. It is the satisfaction of a debt settled, of a story told correctly, of a life reclaimed. I did not win a victory over my children. I simply survived their betrayal. I chose to save myself, and I have no regrets. Sometimes I think about the word family. I used to think it was a bond of blood, an unbreakable chain of obligation. Now I know it is something more fragile, something that must be tended to with honesty and respect. It is a choice you make every day to see someone, to value them, to love them not for what they can give you, but for who they are. My family, the one I was born into, is gone, but my love for my granddaughter is my new legacy. It is a smaller, quieter family, but it is true. The money did not buy me happiness. It bought me clarity. It was a harsh, bright light that illuminated the dark corners of my life and showed me the truth I had been unwilling to see. The truth that I was worth more than my utility to others. The truth that it is never, ever too late to close a door on a life that is causing you pain and walk through a new one into the sunshine. It is never too late to choose yourself. That is my real fortune, and it is more than enough.